I actually fought a black belt when I was a purple belt, and it was a crazy scandal. It was supposed to be a 10-minute match, like one 10-minute round. So we did that, and I was whooping his. So then they go overtime. I'm like, overtime? What overtime? Overtime. So then they added a 5-minute overtime. So now we're up to 15 minutes. And I beat his in that round. So now that was another 5 minutes. So now we're up to 20 minutes. But he ended up taking me down, and they gave him the match. It was nonsense. The crowd was booing, throwing things in the ring. It was crazy.
Welcome back to FURYCAST. Also, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and of course, smash the bell for notifications. All the way from beautiful Rancho Cucamonga, California, I have Javier Vazquez. How you doing, Javier?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing very well. I'm very excited to have you on the show today. Let's start from the beginning. If you could take a couple minutes and tell people that may not know who you are and what you do.
My name is Javier Vazquez. I'm a 5th degree Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I started training back in 1997. I was a former MMA fighter. I competed in grappling at the highest level. I won the ADCC trials, I believe, in 2005. I was a college wrestler. Had 21 professional fights. I had about 25 total fights. So I developed a style of jiu-jitsu that was kind of specified for fighting. And my goal was to be able to, in the worst case scenario, if I was to be put on my back, how to be offensive and then have, high levels of defense so I would not take damage. I thought not taking damage was a very important thing for the longevity of my health over time. So I kind of prioritized that while still being, highly effective in jiu-jitsu and MMA.
Now that's interesting because the seminar you did, it was in the gi. Do you do mostly no gi or what is it? It sounds no gi. It's not, if it's specified for MMA, it sounds like it would be a no gi situation, no?
I was a college wrestler, so putting a gi I felt was kind of difficult, something to get used to. And over the years, I just, we're going to start our gi season here just because it's cold, just because of the weather. I wear the gi, but honestly, I haven't been a fan of the gi for several years. I've actually even considered just doing straight no gi. But I just haven't let go of it yet, even though 99% of everything I teach is kind of, you don't need a gi. So it's kind of a bit redundant or not necessary for me to wear a gi in order for me to achieve what I want. And when you wear a gi, I just do the same thing anyways. It gives me a little bit more friction, but I'm still able to achieve the same goals. So.
And you said something interesting. You said you're starting your no gi season. Do you do half the year gi, half the year no gi? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, basically. Last year I think we only did about 4 or 5 months in the gi because the students prefer no gi too. So, I'm still holding on to it, but I prioritize it less and less as time goes on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back a little bit and tell me about your childhood. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in El Monte, California. I went to a Royal High School. I wrestled for 3 of the 4 years that I was in high school there. I was team captain 2 of those years, and I was a state qualifier my senior year. So I improved quite rapidly between my junior and senior year. I basically put a whole year into just getting better. I was pretty disappointed with the way my junior year went. I was a match away from placing at the CIF tournament. And I just kind of made a decision to just wrestle from that point until the next year nonstop and to see how much I could improve. And I improved quite a bit. So, I grew up in, like with gangs and everything around. There's bullying and gangs and everything else. I grew up in El Monte, so
What county is that? Is that LA County?
LA County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spent my teenage years in LA County as well. I was out in West Covina. So yeah, it's kind of similar similar
Similar.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
similar kind of city, similar kind of.
Is bullying what led you to wrestling or something else altogether?
No, I just always liked pro wrestling, and I kind of always liked kind of wrestling around. So I decided to start wrestling. When I walked into the room, I was like, "Where's the ring? There's no ring in here," But um, I didn't understand the rules or anything like that. But I just wanted to try it. I thought, and it was fun. I always, and then in high school you get to try all the sports. So PE, you get to try volleyball, you get to try all the sports, and one of the times we tried wrestling. So, um,
Same
I
here, yeah.
just wanted to try it.
So you go from wrestling to what then?
Um, I wrestled in college, and then in 1994, I watched the first UFC on from a Korean you know place where you can rent video.
Storia.
Yeah,
We still have
and
some of those here. I get all the underground Hong Kong movies. Like we still have a
right,
couple of those here. Yeah.
right. So I watched UFC, but I was wrestling in college, and I knew that going to my back wasn't a great idea, getting used to that habit. So I wanted to kind of finish wrestling first before I started jiu-jitsu. So I started jiu-jitsu under the Carlson Gracie team under Professor Rodrigo Medeiros in 1997 in Whittier. And at that time, there was nothing. There was nothing. There was nobody. 97, there was like the Torrance Academy or Hickson. I went out to Hickson's in West LA, and it was just so far. I'm like, no way. This is way too far. And I ended up finding Rodrigo Whittier. And
It's interesting. I did Shotokan karate in Whittier back then. So
yeah, we were in downtown Whittier.
yeah, I don't remember where it was. This is, like I said, I was 12, 13. But so you started in Whittier, and what was that like walking in? The first time you walked in, was it intimidating?
No, I actually went with my wrestling coach. We both he's the one that actually found the place. Um, so we wanted to go check it out, and it was kind of similar to like wrestling. It was the school had just opened. This was like Rodrigo had just started. So I was one of the first students he had. I was the third black belt he's ever given. And it seemed, they were very kind of competition oriented. So the intensity was kind of high. So for me, it kind of seemed normal, seemed like a good match at the time. Um, for my style coming from college wrestling. So, it wasn't intimidating or anything. I was, as a white belt, I was hanging with the blue belts. I would get caught by the blue belts, but I would be able to be okay. And the white belts, I was pretty much beating. I mean, I was a wrestler. I mean, we're way ahead skill wise, at least, in a lot of senses. You just got to kind of get familiar with the positions, and the transitions.
Now, was it difficult to transition from the mindset, especially in terms of like maybe fighting off your back?
Not really. I mean, the mindset was always to be pretty aggressive no matter what position I was in. So, being on my
The guard
back,
wasn't a difficult situation for you, the guard?
no, not really. Rodrigo's team, Carlson's team was pretty heavy on, triangle armbar. So it's really just kind of drilling the leg movements in order to get it to work, and then don't get your guard pass. That was the other thing. So that's kind of what I started with. Don't get your guard pass and triangle and armbar if you end up in guard. So it kind of simplified what I was doing. I really didn't start learning how to pass, like really pass, other than just kind of scrambling, until I was like a purple belt. That's when I kind of started to learn how to pass. At brown belt, I was dialing in my submissions, and then I think I was ready for black at least a year before I actually got it. And it only took me 5.5 years to to black. So that would have been
Wow.
like 4.5 years. And at that time, it was like unheard of or unseen that somebody can progress so quickly. So
Yeah.
Rodrigo held me. It was fine. I mean, I was only a brown belt 2.5 years, so it's not that long, you know. So
That's like getting a new belt every year.
I was getting 6 months. At 6 months, I was a blue belt. I beat the guy that won the Pan Ams as a white belt. The guy that won the blue belt Pan Ams. I fought him in Santa Cruz, and then at purple was a year later. So I was a blue belt a year and I won like 16, 17 tournaments. What are you going to do with a blue belt that's winning 16 tournaments in a year?
Promote them. That's all you
You
can
got to
do.
promote them. So I got to purple at a year and a half. I was a purple belt, and then I was 2 or 2.5 years at brown.
That's insane. That's BJ Penn style stuff right there. Right?
He was a little bit ahead of me. I competed against him, and as he would get promoted, I would get promoted. So, and then he won the Mundials, and then he kind of got his black belt, you know.
So
or he got his black belt right before the Mundials.
Yeah, they gave it to him before, right? Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, it was right before, like the week before, and then he went out and won it.
Yeah, insane. So you get your black belt. How old are you?
I think I was like 24, maybe 25.
Even that, wow. That's so 24, 25-year-old black belt around what, early 2000s is this?
2003.
2003.
So I was like, imagine, okay, so the jiu-jitsu would take, 10 to 12 years to get a black belt, right? So then if you started in 93, like right when the UFC started or right before the UFC hit in 93, then you were getting a black belt right around the time when I got a black belt. So even though I was the second generation, because I started in 97, I wasn't the first generation, which was, the guys that started in 93 or before. Because I progressed so quickly, I kind of graduated with that first generation or the second generation of Americans that got it. Because the first generation were guys like
the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah, like those guys and guys like the guy in Vegas that was Chuck Liddell's jiu-jitsu coach.
Laban?
No, not Layman. Lewis. I forget his name. Anyways, the bald guy. It's bald guy. So yeah, I realized like everybody who owns a school like was one of my guys at some point, like pretty much the guys around, like guys who have schools, like pretty much everybody that's around, and a bunch of the black belts that are around are like
what came up from under you, you're saying?
At some point they were under me. At some point.
Another competition, right? What are you gonna do, right?
I mean,
yeah. Hey, it's the state of jiu-jitsu. We're blessed to be in a place like this. I'm in Houston. Literally, my school, and I restarted my school right after COVID. I started before COVID and just got squashed because I was only about 20 people and just didn't have the people to, once COVID hit, to sustain it. But restarted. So I'm about 2 years into it now, and there's literally 10 different jiu-jitsu schools within 15-minute drive in all directions, and we're blessed in a way because I couldn't have imagined that when I started jiu-jitsu the sport would be where it is, the art would be where it is.
The UFC had a lot to do with it. The popularity of submission grappling over the past few years has had something to do with that. Social media's, before you couldn't find moves. Moves were like super secret from everyone. Now it's like you got a bunch of it. a bunch of things that I'm never going to do, but
no, absolutely. Yeah, I've got a couple students that are on that TikTok University jiu-jitsu track. They come like, yeah, I saw this.
The good news for me is I think I can see through the matrix a little bit, and I know exactly what works and exactly what doesn't, and where the loopholes are for things happening. And what's happened over time is that my students see it now too. So guys that are like purple belts, they're like, nope, that's not going to work because of this. Nope, that's not going to work because of this, or this is easy to counter because of that. So they can kind of see it. They go to open mats. They're like, nobody knows. Like the things that I show them, like nobody knows anything about what you're doing. I'm like, I know nobody knows, not yet.
And I
But
do want
you
to get
did a
into that
seminar,
because,
so it's the
yeah, I know.
mindset. That's the mindset behind it, you know.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. So you're a black belt at in 2003. How old did you say you were? 23, 26, something? What'd you say?
20, yeah, probably 24, 25.
24, 25, which in and of itself is incredible because you've got your whole life ahead of you. And you decide to not only compete at the highest levels of jiu-jitsu, but also to go into what, well, at that time, were we still calling it NHB? I guess the
Yeah,
term,
NHB.
yeah, no holds barred. The term MMA came around shortly after, but or people would say cage fighting. I'm a cage fighter. It was super tough
Yes,
to say that, right? But
yes.
what um what led you to make that decision?
Um, I saw the guys that were fighting, and I'm like, I can beat every one of these guys. So at the time, I just felt that I was a little bit ahead of everybody. I think I just kind of blended the jujitsu with the wrestling better than most people. I was already kind of a pretty creative wrestler. I kind of did my own things,
Mhm.
and I was always kind of innovating in wrestling. And then, but there's a rule set within wrestling and jujitsu. There really is no limitation to what you can do. So I thought that that was really good for me. So I was just able to blend things very easily. It wasn't super hard for me to kind of mix things up. Um, and I knew that I had 2/3 of the puzzle. I knew that I could wrestle and take everybody down, and I knew that my jujitsu was good enough. When I started competing, well, my first fight
At
I was
that
a
time,
blue.
you were the guys. Average guys were maybe four stripe white belts going into MMA. It's like you
Yeah,
would have
I
been
was
light
I
years
was
ahead of
already
them,
I was a blue belt. I was a dangerous blue belt with good wrestling.
hmm
And then
which is serious. People, I don't think people understand that what you just said because, especially at that time, like a blue belt at that time, even when I started, was a pretty serious dude
yeah,
to
very
to
few
roll with.
purple belts. There's very
Very
few
few.
purple belts.
If I saw a
And
purple
then
belt, it was like seeing a Tyrannosaurus in the wilderness or something. You're like,
yeah,
holy,
yeah,
like
exactly.
holy,
Um,
you know.
and then I was a purple belt. So then now I'm towards the top of the guys, right? So within a year, I'm a purple belt. And then I did most of my fights, I think, between purple and brown. Um, and then I got my black belt. Uh, when I fought Alberto Crane, I was a brown belt. He had just won the Mundials as a black belt,
Mhm.
so I was competing with the guys that had good jujitsu, but I had wrestling. So my wrestling was better than most of their jujitsu. My jujitsu was better than most of their jujitsu. So I was still a little bit ahead. And the only thing I was missing was striking, which at the time I was working on it, but I just never showed it. I didn't feel a need to show my striking unless you can stop me from taking you down. Then you're going to figure out that I can strike too. So um, I kind of was always very hidden with the things I was doing technically, because I knew I was ahead a little bit. So I didn't want to show anything to anybody. And at the time, nobody was really showing things anyways, because
Absolutely.
that was the culture. So it was kind of okay. And the main thing was I didn't want people learning what I was doing, because then I had to learn. Then I got to deal with it,
Yeah.
which I didn't want to have to deal with it. So I just kind of played my game, stayed within my own little sandbox, didn't show too much technically. You never saw me sparring, stand up sparring, so people can pick up rhythms and stuff. So I tried to keep everything hidden for many years, and then I fought and had good success. Um,
Who were you doing
Now
your
it's all
striking with?
um, just my teammates, but uh, we did the Boss Rutten striking system, which is the Dutch kickboxing system.
Mhm.
We kind of learned that, and then Dwayne Ludwig was a friend of ours that showed us. Dwayne was always really good, and we were all good friends, and we all trained, and we all kind of stole from each other. I'll teach you grappling if you teach me striking, Dwayne. You know what I mean? So we were always kind of. Um, I was Dwayne's system is so good. Boss's system is so good that it was the only system that worked for me. Like I just had a hard time with striking. I just couldn't get it. I didn't understand the rhythm. I didn't understand the range. I didn't understand other than just sheer speed. I didn't understand how to set things up through motion. I do now, but that, it's been 25 years of me figuring that out. But at the time, I didn't like it. I didn't like the striking or kicking element. Kicking I still don't like because you throw kicks and if it lands, great. But if you land it with the wrong part of your leg or your foot, it's going to hurt. If the guy checks it, it's going to hurt. So it's like Russian roulette every time you throw a kick. Is it going to break my foot or not? If the guy knows how to check. And so I got good at checking so that I wouldn't have to get good at kicking. Every time guys would kick, boom, I check it on their foot and they stop kicking. So I kind of I would do things that kind of made people limit their offense against me. Guys wouldn't open up against me because I would just take them down. You couldn't try to knock me out because I would just take you down. So my style was kind of evolving into this style where I wasn't taking a lot of damage. I was winning fights pretty easily because guys couldn't really adjust to the game I was bringing forth.
Now, what organizations were you in California at that time? You had like what, Gladiator Challenge, King of the Cage.
I never fought in Gladiator Challenge, even though I won their belt. I ended up fighting their champion and won their belt. So I was the King of the Cage champion, and I ended up beating the Gladiator Challenge champion as well. I fought at something called Kaja's Cage Combat in San Pedro. I actually fought a black belt when I was a purple belt that I thought I beat, and the crowd thought I beat, and it was a crazy scandal. I was supposed to fight. I won my first fight, and I think I won my first fight, and I made it into the finals. And he won his first fight and made it into the finals. And then it was supposed to be a 10-minute match, like 10-minute round. So we did that, and I was whooping his ass. So then they go, overtime. I'm like, overtime? What overtime? Overtime. So then they added a 5-minute overtime. So now we're up to 15 minutes. And I beat his ass in that round. Couldn't take me down. So then they go overtime again. They did another overtime
You're
round.
lying. Oh
and then so now that was another 5 minutes. So now we're up to 20 minutes. And he ended up taking me down. I ended up getting back up, but he ended up taking me down, and they gave him the match. It was nonsense. The crowd was booing, throwing things in the ring. It was crazy. But I was a purple belt beating up at the time. The guy had a lot of students. And
well, at that time, that was before the wave of the wrestler really hit MMA. So
it was right around that time. Right around that time.
So a lot of people weren't ready for it, probably, the wrestling.
They weren't ready for anti-wrestling. They weren't ready for guys that were just really hard to take down. I'm not going to take you down. See if you can take me down. And jiu-jitsu guys, takedowns are terrible. So, and then I have a cage to hold me up. Good luck taking me down. Good luck, So that was kind of the game plan against them because I'm like, I'm just going to keep it standing and just try to beat him standing, even though I really didn't know how to strike. But I figured the guy's a black belt and I'm like a blue belt, a purple belt. So I'm like, do I really want to take my chances? Who knows? Maybe I can get lucky, hit or whatever. So that was the strategy I kind of followed for that fight.
And how long did you compete in MMA?
Till 2011 was my last fight.
2011.
So from probably 2002, it was like 13 years total. So 2001 to 2000, yeah, 2001.
10 years.
Yeah. It's 13 years total.
And what led you to hang up the gloves, so to speak?
It's a hard job to do when you don't want to do it. You know what I mean?
It's got to be a lot of money motivating you if you don't want
you got to be motivated. And it got to a point where I wasn't super motivated. Even though I fought in the UFC, the fights that they were giving me, especially after my career and the way things have gone, I wanted to fight top guys, and they I wasn't interested and I wasn't super motivated, you know. So I'm, you know, I thought to myself, I'm not super motivated. And now I'm, you know, I'm fight. Well, I always fought really good guys, but like now it's like every guy's going to be a killer. When I was in the UFC, even in the WEC, like, you know, that my WEC career, I was like 2-3 or something, but I should have been like 4-1. There was two decisions that I thought I won, two decisions that the WEC thought I won. And I was pretty, you know, first time I had back-to-back losses. So, you know, like my WEC run was so irritating to me because there's a big difference between, you know, being 3-2 and being 4-1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was already kind of like irritated with it. Then they merged with UFC. I'm like, okay, fresh start, right? So then I won my fight, and then
Did you go over to the
I just had
UFC
and I
when
had a
they?
lot of injuries. I had a lot of
Yeah.
injuries. I had my knee injuries, and I was just banged up. I wrestled really hard for a long time. So, yep,
Who'd you fight in the UFC?
Joe Stevenson.
Joe Daddy.
Mhm.
Hmm. How'd that go?
I won easy. I thought I won a pretty
Okay,
easy decision.
that's awesome.
Um, I didn't finish him, but I dominated the whole fight, dominated the stand up, got my takedowns. Fought smart, had a good boxing coach that helped me with footwork and learning how to throw a jab and it stopped. If you don't know that I can strike and you don't have any respect for my striking, I was pretty good. I didn't show it very much, um, but I had good defense. If you opened up too much, I was really good at taking people down. So it kind of would limit people's striking. It would make guys that were a lot better than me at striking less good, less good. And it would make it kind of level out the playing field where the threat of me being able to take guys down whenever I wanted, these guys wouldn't open up and try to knock me out because if they ended up on the ground one time with me, I can tap them. So
And so you go from the WEC to the UFC. How many fights in the UFC did you have?
just one, just the
Just
one.
one. And what was that experience like? That was what year was that? Joe Daddy was probably 10, 12
2011.
years. Yeah. And so that was still kind of the Wild West days, the Zuffa days of the UFC. That was pre, you know, big contracts with ESPN and all that stuff. So what was it like to have a UFC fight?
It's the same. It was the same as the WBC. The arenas were a little bit bigger, but it was the exact same crew of people putting the shows together. So I felt that I was already in the UFC, you know, 5 fights before. It was
Yeah.
all the same. It was the same process. It was the same people. It was the same everything, you know. So it was fine. You know, I just always felt I belonged there. I thought most of my career should have been there, but you know, circumstances and things that happen and injuries that happen along the way. I was supposed to fight in UFC 42,
Mhm.
and injuries happen, knee injuries happen, and I just kind of didn't end up getting in until like 10 years later or something.
And you had one fight and didn't go on. What happened? Is there a story behind that or just the way it worked
No,
out?
just the way it worked out. Just the way
Yeah.
it worked out. I didn't want to keep fighting, and you know, you can't, you know, basically force people that don't want to fight to fight. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So at what point did you decide to start a school?
well, I've always had a school.
You did.
Um, the first school we had was in '98. I was a blue belt teaching.
It was your own school at Blue Belt?
It was myself and a few other guys, the
And you
original Millennium Jiu-Jitsu.
okay, and you got a blessing from your instructor. He said, "Hey, you can go ahead and start your own little thing."
He never really gave us any problem with it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we're so far away. We're 20 miles away from each other,
Yeah,
25 miles away from
absolutely.
each other.
And what was it? So at Blue Belt, you start teaching. Man, that's got to be wild, huh?
Um, yeah, we were just trying to get enough people in to get good training partners to train for fights. You know, that was the kind of we had a school, so we had a place to train where we didn't have to listen to anybody. We just wanted to do our own thing.
Now, was it
Um,
what year was this?
98 was like a year after I started doing jujitsu, I was
Yeah.
already teaching.
And you said the name of it was Millennium Jiu Jitsu.
Millennia Jiu-Jitsu.
Millennia Jiu-Jitsu. Was it at that time, because that's probably about the time I was hunting for jiu-jitsu schools here in Houston? There was really only one or two places, but you would have like you said, maybe a blue belt or purple belt. It was really more of an MMA thing with a purple belt, but it was always like in an empty room at like a garage, like a mechanic's garage, or the back room where like a barbershop had an extra room. People would put mats down. Was it that kind of situation, that kind of old school vibe?
Yeah, it was a basement of a building. So you'd have to go down this kind of, it almost looked like a castle. The stairs were like all dirt, dusty and stuff. You go down the stairs, and then it opened up, and we had a mat, and then we eventually put up a cage, a wall, like a cage wall. We probably had the first cage wall in California. I think people weren't even doing them at the time.
Yeah, I didn't
Like
see it till
we
10
had
years
to
ago.
we had to like a fence company come down and put it up, and they're like, "What are you guys doing down here?" And then they put the bolts all facing inward. So I looked, I'm like, we had to go all the way, all to change all the bolts. It was like a 30 or 40-foot wall. Change all the bolts and flip them around the other way. It was wild. It was
Yeah, I
wild.
love those stories because it's so, it reminds me of that era, the tap out era. That's where
Yeah.
it was. Now you go to a school, like you said, it's very nice. You could buy professionally done cage walls if you just want to do one wall, and
No, everything was DIY. Yeah.
yeah, do it yourselves. Yeah,
Mhm.
but it lended to the aesthetic, the feel, like you were going down into a dungeon to like really
Yeah.
train hard. You know what I mean?
And then eventually we took over the upstairs. So then we had like heaven and hell. So the upstairs had like a blue wall, and
Hmm.
then the downstairs had black walls with, so it was like two different kind of vibes. Downstairs was the fight, basically where all the fighters came. We had a lot of good guys come through and train with us back in the day.
And
We had the best guys.
so you're doing you're fighting a little, you're fighting in the UFC or the WEC. You have a school going on, um, and then you decide to go ahead and retire from fighting. Do you focus 100% on your school, or are you still competing in jiu-jitsu at that time?
Um, yeah, I was open to competing a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I had multiple schools throughout the years. But yeah, once when I retired, then I kind of opened up another school here in Rancho, and with my ex, and we got that going, and then now I've got this school over here, different part of Rancho. But yeah, it turned into 2011 was a tough year, dealing with retiring after always being able to take a fight whenever I needed money and stuff, like, and changing the mindset around it. It was tough on me, I think. And along with some personal struggles, it was a rough year. And ultimately, some things happened that really changed changed my perspective on life, and it turned into, from becoming the best fighter in the world, or being the best fighter in the world, to being able to teach everything I know, and pass that on to my kids, and being able to translate and create something that can, you know be around for a while. So that's when I started writing the curriculum that I've been working on since 2011. That's been the project, and because jujitsu is so complex, it's been a project. Um, I just think it can be taught a little bit differently, and people can get better much faster. So everything I do now is designed to have huge impacts in people's mindset, because that's where everything kind of starts. I can teach you a bunch of moves, but if I change the way you think about something, that's going to last a lot longer. And I think that jujitsu is just it wasn't designed to be learned fast, to get good fast. That was not one of the desired results. I think that over time, well, from the beginning, we're told that, you have to learn these moves in order to survive. And it's not just learning moves, but it's developing skill sets, and even more so, more than that, controlling body parts, and understanding how to do it. So when I first started in 2011, I wrote 16 books. I wrote every move I knew by chapter in order. Um, it was 2,500 pages. It was like over 400,000 words. And that allowed me to kind of lay everything out and to start seeing things from like a table of content perspective. And it allowed me to see, okay, where am I weak? Where am I strong? What works well? What doesn't? And it allowed me to kind of pull from that catalog the things that worked the best. Because I believe that that's the way that you learn jiu-jitsu. Pull the things out that work the best first and start from that foundation, rather than from a foundation of the move is basic and easy to do. Let's look at what moves from this position work the best. And I started to ask questions that weren't really being asked before. And then when I got sick, I kind of had a bit of a mental breakthrough. Definitely God inspired it kind of gave direction to kind of what the project and where I was going. And he kind of gave me an understanding of how to better present the material. And, same way when I taught that seminar, everything is reverse engineered. We're developing a timeline of events to reach certain points, which by that point, we understand that when we reach certain points from that point forward, things are good. So I don't have to get to the finish. I just got to get to particular points. And then more often than not, I will be able to finish if I can reach certain points. And that came far beyond me writing everything down and writing the knowledge down, and then, picking and choosing what I want to do, based on the best possible options from each configuration. And then as time went on, I started to recognize that there are relationships between my positions, right? So I had I had standing, which was striking and grappling. So that's pretty easy. And then this is where it gets a little bit complicated. Now, the second part would be chest to back. Chest to back is core position, right? So when you're chest to back, those are two positions which work as one, which is the turtle and the back mount. So then you have chest to chest. The chest to chest positions are guard, side mount, and mount. And then you have supplemental positions, which are leg locks and arm locks. Now, when you look at guard, side mount, and mount, chest to chest, and supplemental, the big differences between those positions is chest to chest. The primary control is your chest and your arms, as well as chest to back, right? Chest to back, your primary control is your chest and your arms. That's what kind of holds the position in place. When you transition to supplemental positions or extremities, now you're dealing with arms and legs. So the primary control point transitions from your chest and hands to your legs. Now your legs are doing most of the controlling. So it started to kind of give me a better perspective of why are we always trying to go after people's arms, completely compromising the position. Same thing for leg locks. We're compromising our chest to chest connection and go into a leg lock, and now the position can flip. Now you can go from bottom. It's too easy to go from bottom to top.
It's high risk.
It's a higher risk.
Mm-hmm.
So I think categorizing that stuff and understanding that there are categories to moves, it kind of gives you perspective of a hierarchy of importance, that some positions are more important than others. And then I started to recognize that one of the biggest conflicts that we have in jiu-jitsu are between two positions, well, three positions: guard top and guard bottom. That's where a lot of conflicts happen. And that conflict is that the legs are now encompassed in the battle, which is the guy's best defensive posture, because now he has four limbs to defend rather than two. Like if you pass the side mount, he's got two. If you mount, he's got two, right? So, categorizing the positions and starting to analyze, well, what really works? When you take chest to back positions and supplemental positions, those positions are linked as finishing destinations. Mm-hmm. So when I started to look at it from that perspective, I started going, oh, okay, well, chest to chest is the most complex. There's 6 chapters in chest to chest. There's the guard, side mount, and mount. Out of those 3 positions, which is the most important position? Which position gives me the most stable level of control? Side mount, or guard? Which position gives me the most amount of control?
I go for side mount.
Side mount, I call the central hub. From side mount, once you bypass the legs, I don't call it passing the guard anymore. I say bypassing the legs. I can get around your legs. I can show you how to get around the legs. The legs are not that hard to get around. From side mount, you can go to arm locks. Yeah. From side mount, you can go to leg locks. From side mount, you can go to mount.
I can do more there. Mount,
what's that?
I can do more there.
It's Dallas Fort Worth. You can go to and from there. Right, it kind of goes everywhere. So side mount is the primary position on the ground. Well, if it's the primary position on top, that means it's got to be the primary position on the bottom. So when you're defending side mount bottom, this is where the defensive process starts. Because if the person doesn't let you get your legs involved, or passes your guard and then doesn't let your legs come back, what do you have left? You have side mount. And then there's a twisting transition from side mount to turtle. Mm-hmm. And then from turtle, which is the middle position between side mount and standing, you try to stand up and disengage. So when you're on the bottom, you have a choice. You have a choice of a couple of things. One, you can transition from bottom, from side mount to turtle and then stand up and disengage. That's one option. Or your other option is to figure out a transition to understand how to go from bottom to top. If you can do one of those two things, the tension shifts. Now the control shifts. The amount of who the person who's generating the tension changes, and you go from sustaining tension to generating tension.
Now, people listening might sound complex, but if you're in a seminar with Javier, it all makes sense. It all seems very simple, actually. It's been my take on it. Do you agree?
I mean, it's the presentation style. You got to kind of lay out a foundation, mm-hmm. and every seminar is a sandbox. We're only working from a small sandbox of things. At least that's the way I do it. I don't like to teach seminar where I'm teaching things from all different places, because then you end up getting lost. I generally teach systems. I generally teach you how to get good at a particular thing, or a particular attack pattern, and then I just break things down frame by frame, and then I try to filter people into fights that I'm going to win 80 to 90% of the time. Or at the very least, if you do get out, it takes a substantial amount of energy and effort, so that the next time you get in there, you're more likely to not try to get out based on the amount of effort it takes to get out.
Yeah. Now, watching you move, watching you roll, your body mechanics are different visually than a lot of jiu-jitsu out there. Is that a byproduct of your curriculum? It almost looks like a new style. Would you categorize it as a new style of jiu-jitsu?
I mean, I guess you definitely it's definitely new. It's definitely different. I think it starts from my focus. I think that when you understand things at this level, this will make sense. We are taught, or we've been taught over the time that I've done jujitsu, that the legs, I always ask, what body part do you focus on most in your jujitsu training? And I say it's the legs. The legs are what attack the submission. The legs are what people are trying to pass. The legs are what get you out of side mount. The legs are what attacks transitions and sweeps. The legs, the legs, the legs, the legs, the legs. That is the primary body part that we are encompassing into the fight. Jiu-Jitsu teaches you how to more effectively use your legs in order to defend yourself. That's what it is. It's your legs. What I'm saying is that the legs are important, of course, but if you understand how to bypass them, there is no guard. I call guard the illusion of salvation. From the person on the bottom is thinking that they're going to get to guard, and that guard is going to make them feel better. One, getting to guard is incredibly difficult with me based on the angles that I fight and how I am fighting your legs. And secondly, when you realize that you can't put me in guard, what is the next step that the person has to take? And what I say is that they have to turn. Well, I want the person to turn their back because it's easier for me to fight them from there, and they want to turn their back. So I think we're in agreement. So that's good. So if you can stop people from putting you back in the guard and omit or delete the legs from the battle, it only forces a turning behavior. And that twisting transition, I am controlling, and I'm the one that's generating it. My focus is not your legs. I know that your legs aren't as useful as you think they are. My focus is controlling your hands. So everything changes. The fact that my primary focus is your hands shifts everything. It simplifies the problem because I know that your hands are what cause 95% of my problems. So if I can control your hands, I can master controlling your hands from every position, every configuration, and understanding that some configurations are red zones and some configurations are green zones. The red zones being I'm going to win the battle to get out of there or win the battle to control less than 50% of the time, sometimes less than 30% of the time. And the green zones are the ones where I'm going to win 50 or more or 60 or 80 or 90% of the time. I understand where those zones are. I fight away from the red and towards the green. I'm going to win more often than not. Then the question becomes, how do we transition? Which are the battles and how do we transition from red to green? So because I look at the world through a much more simple lens, I know that your hands are the problem. You don't know that your hands are the problem because nobody has battled you the way I battled.
Yeah.
The second that you roll against me, you realize that you have to be better at hand control than I am. You have to understand how to win the configuration battles better than I am. Whether you know it or not, whether you believe it or not, I know this to be true. So I've ran the simulation more than enough time, thousands of times against hundreds of people to know how people behave. I'm predicting and generating behavior based on the feelings that I am able to produce in your mind. So I'm kind of hacking your mind based on my behavior, which makes you behave in particular ways, and it makes things way more predictable. It's easier to do it that way than it is to try to remember 5 million moves and the steps to 5 million moves, which even multiplies that. So it's simplifying the problem and avoiding the move black hole, or what do they say? The rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. The rabbit hole of moves And I say just focus on people's hands and understand how to bypass the legs and control the hands and the turn, and everything changes. It's much easier and simpler to state it that way than it is to say, here are all these moves from all of these different positions. It's too complex.
So do you think what you're doing is actually making jiu-jitsu simpler?
That's all I've been doing, is consolidating to a point where, you know, it's measurable. Every 3 to 4 months, a student is at my academy, they improve substantially. At 2 years, they're very hard to tap. And I've got multiple guys that have gone through the program, and then guys that are older in their 50s and 60s that are impossible, they're super hard to tap, just based on what we're doing. I know it works. I know it works. So I call it rapid skill development. So you're able to get good, much faster than normal.
So what's next for you? What's
I'm
the future
putting
hold?
I'm putting everything online. JVJujitsuOnline.com. I'm putting all of my systems and I'm putting everything online. So right now it's just
Are you doing like a kind of
just
like a
editing
Gracie?
and putting things up. Huh?
Are you doing like a Gracie online type situation where people around the world could be affiliated with you? And
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal. I'm just I'm putting up the programs, basically I come in, I edit, and then I start releasing the programs whenever they're done. I'm working on basic mechanics right now. There's several seminars that I've put up, and then there's the JVOS course, JV Basics, which is the old self-defense course, JVTV, which is a subscription service. So I'm putting up all the products. I've got tons of video. I've got tons of content that's going to be coming out in the next several years. And it's I know that it's different. I know my jiu-jitsu is different because it took a lot of R&D for me to figure it out.
now, what would your advice be for someone starting their martial arts journey today?
I think that finding the right school is important. I think that certain schools work for certain people. And what I mean by that is if you're an older guy, and you go into a school that's like heavily based in competition, like that's going to be tough on you. I try to make the school sustainable for people. I'm in it for the long haul, so we kind of pace ourselves in a way where we're trying to do this long term. And if schools are kind of redlining the students, just know that you're going to get good fast, but at what cost? Like, I look at jiu-jitsu as energy exchanges, right? I want every energy exchange between me and my opponent to be as hard for him, so he's expending the most amount of energy. And for me, I want to be expending the least amount of energy. Every energy exchange, I want it to be like that. So every time that we are engaging in some sort of a scramble or transition or struggle, I want you to be working way harder than me. And as you add these little energy exchanges up over 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, one guy will be a lot less fatigued than the other. And it makes it much easier to tap people when they're more fatigued. So
Absolutely,
that's the plan. So for guys coming in, you got to find a school that kind of has this kind of mindset. I think it's easier for you. It's easier to survive. Having a welcoming atmosphere where guys aren't trying to beat you at all costs. I think that happens a lot in places where at all costs they got to win. And
no fun.
it's
A
not
little fun, but
it's not sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why people quit. They get hurt. They get banged up. It's not sustainable. You got to make the jiu-jitsu that you practice sustainable. If everything is a scramble and everything is explosion and everything, you can do it for a while. You can do it into your 30s and then maybe even into your early 40s. But at some point, you got to slow down. You got to slow it down because
Longevity
It's
is an
not,
issue.
it's not sustainable.
Yep, absolutely.
It's not
Now,
sustainable.
I ask all my guests this. It doesn't have to be funny, but do you have a funny or interesting, just an interesting story, a little anecdote that's happened along your journey in the martial arts all these years?
Um, I mean, a funny story. I mean,
Or
man,
interesting, doesn't have to be funny.
um, my God. Um, I will say this. I don't know if it's funny or not. You tell me after, but um, there has to be part of your jujitsu that understands self-defense. And I know that some people say, well, sport jujitsu is a self-defense in and of itself. There's a mindset behind self-defense jujitsu. And I thought it was my responsibility to, at the very least, learn um, Grandmaster Ilio's self-defense. Whether you believe in it or not, whether you know it, or whether you like it or not, I still think that self-defense should be the root and the base of your jujitsu training. Understanding how not to take damage, understanding how not to get hurt in a fight. And I think that people should look into not only the mindset and the lifestyle, but also look at the techniques and and practice some of it. Like a lot of times people don't even do something as simple as headlocks. People don't work headlocks because they're not super effective in competition. So no one's really headlocking you that knows jujitsu, but the people that don't know jujitsu, that's all they do is headlock. So it's important to learn these basic techniques in order to not be intimidated when you get put in these situations, because headlocks against a strong guy can be problematic if you don't know how to escape. So putting yourself in those vulnerable situations and learning how to fight out of it. Secondly, is nobody likes to be on the bottom and getting crushed and getting smashed. That's the first thing you have to learn how to deal with, is losing and getting crushed on the bottom and making the bottom experience sustainable for yourself physically and psychologically. Fight from places of comfort. Don't fight from an uncomfortable place. If your neck is getting kinked, don't try to bridge and get out. You're going to end up hurting your neck. If your neck is getting kinked, adjust yourself so your neck is no longer kinked, and then work your way out. Learn how to be on the bottom. Understand that some of us have spent tens of thousands of hours on the bottom in bad position, letting different body types and different people be on top of us so that we understand how to better apply the techniques. And I think that a lot of people just don't want to be in bottom side mount because it's uncomfortable. They don't like to be in bottom mount because it's uncomfortable. They might get mounted one time and they get out and they don't want to go back. It's not about getting out. It's about getting out all the time, over and over against anybody who's on top of you, you being able to do the exact same thing. And I think that this attitude, based on the fact that if you're in those positions, you're losing or you're losing points, that mindset, that competition mindset, that point-based mindset isn't helping you. It's very limiting in your growth. And the second, and the day that I learned to let everybody mount you, doesn't matter who they are, let everybody pass your guard, let everybody take your back, let everybody do it so you can understand how to defend it. If you get caught, you get caught. It's all part of the experience. But when you get caught enough, you start to understand the defense, and then you start getting out once and twice and more and more and more. The more you get out, the more confidence you have to be able to do it. But it takes hours and hours and hours. People spend a day on a position. No. I spent years in positions learning what I've learned and figuring out what I've figured out. And I think that not only is it from positions of positivity where you're side mount top or your guard top or your mount top, but spending just as much time in those defensive positions as you have in those offensive positions. People just don't like to do it because it's uncomfortable. But it's uncomfortable until it's comfortable. Once you're comfortable, then it doesn't matter where you're at. One of the philosophies or desired results that I teach my guys is universal comfort. You got to be comfortable everywhere. No matter where you are, he's in trouble.
Absolutely. Well, where can people connect with you? Where can they find you online and get a hold of you?
My Instagram, the Academy Instagram, is at JV Jiu-Jitsu. JVJujitsuonline.com is where I'm going to be putting all of my videos. There's lectures explaining how I learned jiu-jitsu, how the curriculum works at a regular academy, and the differences between us, along with, you know, strategical basics and something I call core ground positions, which is really relaying the foundation of how I look at jiu-jitsu through the lens of core ground positions, as well as interviews and everything else that I'm putting up will go up on my YouTube channel. I believe it's at JV Jiu-Jitsu 5391, if I'm not mistaken. But if not, if you look up JV Jiu-Jitsu, the channel will pop up. But that's what I got going on.
Well, thank you. Excuse me. Well, thank you for your time, sir. It was a pleasure getting to know you more. Hopefully I can hit up one of your seminars, or maybe one day we can have you come out to Houston and share your philosophy and your principles of jiu-jitsu that I find fascinating. And I'll be in touch, and let's stay connected.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. And we've come to the end of yet another episode of FURYCAST. I want to give a big shout out to Professor Javier Vazquez for coming on the show, sharing his journey and his unique take on jiu-jitsu. If you want to connect with him for any reason, his links are in the description. And make sure you show your boy Derrick Fury some love by joining the mailing list for my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild, art by E. Canales. That's right, E. Canales. The link is in the description. And don't forget to watch my feature film, Lion Killer. That's right, I made a movie. It stars Regina Ting Chen, who's currently on season 4 of Stranger Things. You can watch it on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Freevee. There's even a full Spanish dub. And thanks again for watching FURYCAST. Don't forget to like this video. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on Professor Javier Vazquez's unique take on jiu-jitsu. You can also subscribe, and yes, even smash the bell so you can be notified every time I drop a new FURYCAST video. This is Derrick Fury. Until next time, hey.